Welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. In this episode, we have GAPS coach Emma Goodwin from Timeless Cookery, the online cookery school for the nutritional protocol, gut, and psychology syndrome, speaking about how food is therapy, relief, and much more. Join us now. Emma from Timeless Cookery channel on YouTube. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks, Ryder. How are you?
I'm doing great. And Paul put us in touch together, Paul Knight, and he's a great friend. And I'm glad that he recommended you to come on my show. So we're going to have a really fascinating conversation here today. And where I want to start this off with is, how did you get into like your journey? Where did your journey start with what you do and starting your YouTube channel and starting your website? How did that all come about?
Well, I wasn't very well. It's the usual story, isn't it? I was sick and I wasn't getting any better. And every time I went to ask for help, I just wasn't getting it. So I had to kind of do a bit of deep diving. Um, and I discovered this lovely lady called Dr. Natasha. And when I read her book, I just started weeping with relief because I realized that that's what was happening to us. And the book was called GAPS, which is stands for gut and psychology syndrome. And it just described all my kids' symptoms and all the symptoms I had during my pregnancies, and the ear infections and the constant, the snotty noses, and we had tics and twitches, tumor, Tourette's. My daughter had Tourette's, where you just like shout out, she was swearing at the maths teacher at school. I was like, how's this girl going to live her life? It was a bit scary. But anyway, I tried to do the protocol, which is a nutritional protocol, basically, GAPS. It's a way of eating. It's basically how we used to eat before industrial foods came along. Meat and veg and fish and stock pot stews, lots of good fats, all the things they tell us have to go very, we're supposed to have very little bit. It's top of the food pyramid, a little bit of fat, but really I think we should have fat right at the bottom. High fat, lots of tallow, goose fat, lard, the fat from the lamb, butter, ghee, cultured cream, all of those lovely good fats, and lots of ferments as well, lots of fermented foods, fermented dairy, fermented veg, fermented drinks, fizzy pop, but like made of kefir and kombucha, stuff like that. So it's a gut healing protocol. And when I tried to do it by the book, I failed miserably. And then I became a GAPS coach. I trained with Dr. Natasha, and now I've created a GAPS app where people can learn all about this kind of food as medicine. So I'm teaching people all over the world now.
Yeah, I honestly think that food is the best part of being in this reality, right? There's so much you can do with food. And I seriously think that food is the only thing that continues to evolve because you can do so much with it. Everything else kind of seems to be at like a standstill. We haven't really evolved societally, we've just evolved technologically. And I think that food is something that is very important. Do you think, Emma, that people just need a nice home cooked meal and this would solve a lot of our problems?
It's about right, Ryder. Honestly, it's a kind of meat and two veg. What did they used to eat in the Second World War? Meat and two veg. It's kind of, you make things stretch by putting them in the stock pot. It's like a magic cauldron of power potion, and it gives you all those amino acids and the gelatin and the collagen. These things that have kind of been a bit demonized. The collagen, they talk about injecting collagen in your lips and things, and it's like, whoa, that sounds gross. I don't want collagen. Everyone's woken up to the fact that collagen is actually exactly what we need. But we don't really want these hydrolyzed, industrially produced powders for collagen. We want the real deal. Just stick a bit of oxtail in your stock pot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also with all the pesticides and the plastics and everything that goes into the manufacturing of foods. I actually read a study, and I'm sure that you're familiar. You're probably not so much with the United States, but on average, the average American ingest 5 grams of plastic a week, which is as big as a credit card a week in the United States. So
Wow.
by the time you're like 50, that's what, like close to 30 pounds of plastic that you've ingested through your life.
I think, if your gut is intact, meaning not permeable, you haven't got leaky gut, then the plastic should go straight through you, you know. But the trouble is, because of things like glyphosate and these pesticides, and also the vast amounts of grains that we're all imbibing, we're all eating, everything's grains. If it's not corn, it's wheat. If it's not wheat, it's rye. And they all contain gliadin, which is lectin, which contains this stuff called zonulin, and it melts the tight junctions between your little epithelial cells on your gut lining, and then you've suddenly got an in, and whatever is undigested or toxic or whatever can get into your bloodstream. But if you've got those tight junctions really nicely tight, then you're protected. It's like your first line of defense. Your gut is like 80% of your immune system, and it's been sorely compromised by unregulated chemical corporations or self-regulated chemical corporations since the Second World War, really, and some really duff advice from the so-called authorities who are supposed to be out there helping us.
Do you think that this has been done to us on purpose, Emma? Do you think that they're purposefully putting plastics and purposefully putting all these pesticides on our food, and then they're giving it to it? Or is this more of like a distribution problem? Is this a distribution issue and a supply and demand issue?
It's hard not to think that some of this is on purpose. When you look at the history of how we've been advised to eat, because it was never the business of the government how we ate until about 1950s. And there was this guy called Ansel Keys, and he was involved with creating the first the ration. It was called the K ration in the Second World War, and he also did the biggest study on human starvation. And I think he used conscientious objectors for his study. I think it was sort of work that was carried on after the Second World War with the Nazis, frankly. It all came over to the States and it kind of carried on there. And that's when these think tanks arose and started to advise the government to tell people what to eat. And that's when they started to say, don't have saturated fats, have vegetable oils, have margarine. It's better for you. It'll be better for your heart. They kind of sidled into the Heart Association and started to basically tell a load of whoppers, tell massive, great big food lies. There's some interesting guys on Instagram talking about food lies. But yeah, it's hard not to think, is this on purpose? Are they doing this on purpose? I've got to say that I think the vegan agenda is a ploy to weaken humanity, because I help a lot of vegans recover when they've sorely damaged their health by going plant-based to save the planet. You know,
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to ask you is about vegetarians and vegans, because it's this idea that I mean, if somebody wants to be a vegan, if someone wants to be a vegetarian, and it's not about saving the planet, and they just want to do it, then that's like up to them, right? But you're saying that being vegan isn't the healthiest option. So, what would you recommend that people would eat instead of being vegan? Would you cut down your meat intake and do more vegetables, or what would that process look like?
um, I don't advise anyone to become vegan. I don't believe there's any peoples of the world who are vegan. They try and tell you that some people in India are vegan, but really, It's more that there are tribes people in the world who eat nothing but meat. The Inuit of the far north, the peoples of the plains in the Himalayas, the peoples of the Maasai in Africa, they just eat animal products and they don't eat hardly any vegetables. They're really carnivore-ish. But so I don't think it's natural for humans to try to digest plants solely, because when you look at our digestive system, it resembles more the digestive system of a wolf than it does a sheep. Because sheep and cows have rumen, which is a stomach that's full of bacteria ready to receive the plant cellulose, which is really tough to digest. You know, they give us supplements and things in these vegan friendly cellulose capsules.
Mhm.
It says vegan friendly cellulose capsules. They're completely indigestible and actually cause a lot of trouble. So they're not human friendly, but they're vegan friendly. So we're not equipped to digest the plant cellulose. We're just not. But we can digest meats very easily. And you know, I'm helping some little kids who are they've got what they call failure to thrive, where they're literally vomiting up their own mother's milk because it's too toxic to them and they're so broken. And so it's like, what's going to happen to them? They've got failure to thrive. They're basically on their way out. And we can create a kind of substitute for their mother's milk with chicken stock, pureed livers, chicken livers, with a little bit of fermented colostrum and some fermented milk from a dairy, you know, from cows, from goats, from wherever, with a few other little additives in it, you know, but and then we can give that to them. So we don't want to give them a formula, a powdered formula made of I don't know what. I mean, they make baby formula out of soy these days, which is just criminal because that's a complete endocrine disruptor. But you know, we're bringing people back from the edge with this protocol by using animal products prepared in a very easily digestible way, you know.
What would be the cause of that, Emma? Them not being able to take their mother's breast milk? Is that hereditary? Is that a
it's
genetic?
it's basically just they're topped up with toxins, Ryder, and it's kind of like we're all like a bucket, and you know, it's a generational thing. So if my grandmother was a bit, I mean, that generation weren't so bad. She was born in like 1913 or something. That generation had it quite good. But then, you know, my mother's generation, she had antibiotics. She went on the birth control pill. All these things trash your microbiome. And then she had me. And so I was a little, because whatever the microbiome of the mother is, the baby picks it up when they're born. Well, they pick it up. They say it's sterile in utero, but it isn't. And then, of course, I had my kids. I was a little bit deficient, and then I had my kids. They were a little bit deficient, and so it goes on. So you get deficient, you get a bit toxic because of your deficiency, and then your whole body is like a bucket, and it starts to just fill up with you name it. You know, the fire retardants they have on furniture, fumes from paints in the house, cleaning products, the pesticides, the herbicides we've spoken of, any kind of pharmaceuticals you might have taken, if your body hasn't been able to metabolize them and get them out properly, they'll be just milling about. They'll be stored in fat cells. They'll just be, you know, even plant toxins. This is really wild, Ryder. It's blown my mind this last couple of years. I've found out about the lectins, the phytates, the oxalates. Oxalates are a killer, and they're naturally occurring plant toxins, and they just kind of top up in your body if you're a little bit broken and you're not detoxing properly. And the trouble is, we're all a little bit toxic from, as I said, the self-regulated chemical corporations since about the 1950s. It's accumulative.
Yeah, it's really interesting too when you look at the transition from people breastfeeding, because breastfeeding has been really demonized in the United States. I don't know so much about how it's working in the UK, but when you research that and you go back, you realize that Nestle was the biggest perpetuator of getting people from best breastfeeding to subsidizing for formula, and they send out these reps to other countries and they dress their reps as nurses and then convince the mothers that breastfeeding was not the way to go and that they needed to subsidize their breast milk for formula. And that's what got a lot of mothers using formula instead of natural breast milk.
Criminal, frankly. It's criminal. Yeah. And baby's milk, mother's milk, is 50% saturated fat. And then they expect the babies to wean onto rusks and baby rice and carbs, when really babies need a similar amount of saturated fat when they're starting to eat food. So first baby food, perfect first baby food is raw egg yolks, which they tell pregnant mothers not to eat, and they, um, organ meats, liver and heart and kidney and the stock pot. When babies start to, grow their teeth, you can give them like a chicken bone to gnaw on to help them with their teething, and that's going to get their body ready to receive, chicken and whatnot. Yeah, that's criminal that what Nestle did. Yeah,
Do you think that food can be an addiction? No,
oh
not
yeah,
not like necessarily a bad addiction. I mean, I'm sure that it can anything can be good and bad in large quantities. But I want to get your thoughts and your ideas behind food addiction.
for sure. Oh my God, yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people use food as a prop, don't they, to distract themselves or to just pass the time, or I don't know, as a comfort, because they're not actually having their emotional needs met, or they don't have intimacy in their life, or so that kind of putting it in your mouth, and it's like suckling, really, isn't it? It's like suckling at the breast. It's a kind of comforting thing. And why shouldn't we enjoy delicious foods? Because we're sensual beings, and like you say, it's like one of the really fun things of being human, good food. But there's a difference between good food and food like products that have literally been created to get us hooked, which are full of the wrong fats and the wrong sugars. Because we've all got this predisposition to lean towards wanting fats and sugars, because it's natural. That's why we get this. We want the sweet taste. You know, Vegetables taste sweet when they're very high in minerals. And you can measure that with a little bit of kit called a refractometer, and you squeeze a little bit of vegetable juice onto your little thing. It's a tool they use for testing the specific gravity of a must when you're making wine or beer or something like that. And you look through this little thing, and it'll give you a reading. It's a Brix number. It's called a Brix number. And yeah, when vegetables are very high in minerals, they taste really sweet. So it's like we're wired to want a bit of sweetness, but the trouble is sugar. Like the sugar plantations, the industry, the sugar, it's just so toxic, and we don't really need it. I mean, it's nice to have a little bit of sugar to ferment with, you know, but we don't need to eat sugar. We can eat honey, which is a monosaccharide and a medicine. Let's have cold extracted honey, raw from local to you. That's proper medicine, and let's have that. You don't need much. But sugar, my God, and it is so addictive. It is really addictive. Yeah, they've literally sat in a lab and worked out the wrong fats and the wrong sugars and how addictive they could make it. Literally.
And then genetically modified all the foods in order to make it the wrong thing for us to eat, right?
Man, don't even get me started on that. It's just horrendous. That it should be outlawed. It's criminal, really. GMO. What are we doing? What do we think? What do they think they're doing? Trying to make it better than nature made it. Forget it. We can do that by selection anyway. As farmers, we can just select. I used to be a biodynamic organic grower. I used to have a community supported agriculture scheme, and I do 20 veg boxes a week, and I kept chickens and bred pigs and had sheep. And you can select the animals you want to breed with. It just takes a few generations. But this stuff they're doing with the genetic modification is just a joke. It's not a joke, it's dangerous.
Well, there's stories in the United States about farmers growing all of their crops and doing everything on their farm, and then somebody would come in and plant some kind of different crop that would contaminate the all of the farmers like organic crops, and then they would come in and like attempt to shut them down if they weren't like complying with the regulations and complying with all the stipulations that they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, man, Monsanto did that and came in and went, now that your corn's pollinated with our pollen from our genetically modified thing, that means your thing is now genetically modified. You don't have the pay, you can't use it because we've got the patent and we're going to sue you. And actually putting people like that's happened. It's shocking, absolutely shocking. No, farming has been under attack for generations. Farming's been under attack since they brought cheap imports from one continent to another in like the late 1800s. Farming's been under attack for the longest time. It's a miracle, actually, that if you can get hold of some nice organic pasture raised something, you're lucky. And raw milk as well. I know you've got the Weston A. Price Foundation there in America, amazing, fabulous organization who have a fund for farmers who are being harassed by the authorities for selling raw milk, which is a wonderful gift of a food, raw milk.
So you mentioned honey earlier. Is it true that we should be ingesting local honey from local bees? What's the dynamic there, and how does that help us?
I'm not sure why, but I think it is whatever's local to you has the medicine in it. So, say for instance, you suffer with a bit of hay fever, maybe, which incidentally will be gut related. Not that a lot of people would acknowledge that, but if you've got any kind of inflammation and, getting a runny nose when you come near a cat or some kind of allergy, that's because your immune system's compromised because you've got leaky gut that I was explaining earlier, which can be sorted out with gaps. But say you have got a bit of a reaction to pollen in your area, you know, so taking local raw honey can just be a kind of homeopathic little dose of the medicine to help you deal with that. But it's a monosaccharide as well, honey, which means it's in the smallest building blocks of sugar. So your body doesn't need to break honey down. It's already broken down into an easily assimilable, really nourishing, lovely thing. So it's not going to feed pathogens. The thing is with table sugar and other sugars is that they're disaccharides or polysaccharides, means lots of sugars stuck together, which means your body's got to break them into the single monosaccharide before it can use it. But because we're a bit broken, we're not breaking it down properly. So you're getting whole pieces of undigested sugar getting in your bloodstream and causing inflammation and also feeding pathogenic gut bugs. So that's the whole point of the protocol that I'm doing is we're getting rid of those pathogenic gut bugs and replacing them with these wonderful ferments, probiotic foods that we're making at home for pennies because it's really affordable to just, chop up a cabbage with some salt. That's your medicine. you know.
Now, how is food connected to spirituality? Do you think that there's a solid connection there?
I would say so, yeah. Having been a biodynamic grower, so I was very connected to the land where I was growing my veg, and I would plant by the phases of the moon, and I would practice biodynamics, which is when you take certain um, preparations and mix them into a vortex of water in a barrel, and you would sit there for an hour and meditate before you sprayed the water on your land to feed the plants or to feed the soil or whatever. So you would sit there and meditate, thinking about how lush the plants were going to grow and thinking about, just visualizing all good things and giving thanks to these plant beings. I mean, the diva of the field or the land has a kind of guardian in the fairy realms. I don't know what you want to call it. There are energies out there, and we can work with them definitely when we're growing our food and when we're husbanding the land and stewarding the land and husbanding the animals as well. Definitely, it's all to do with how you imagine best possible outcomes and give thanks, to these invisible forces that they're there 100%.
Yeah, that's what I like to do, and that's why I like to cook. Even if my cooking isn't the best and it doesn't, taste the best, I still look at it as like a meditative practice. Like I don't hardly ever eat out, and when I do eat out, it's like once a month or twice a month or something like that. Majority of my time is when I eat is from what I cook, so
Great.
that's a I think that it's a very meditative process, right? Because I think that we've gotten the wrong idea of, from my personal opinion and my personal thoughts, the wrong idea of what meditation is. You don't necessarily need to be sitting with the lights off with your eyes closed in a meditative Buddha's stance or doing whatever, right? Meditation can be done while you're doing other things.
I like it. Yeah.
And that's what I use for washing the dishes. That's what I use when I'm taking a shower. That's what I use when I'm cooking.
How lovely. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, when I was about 28, I had a massive mental breakdown, which, knowing what I know now about gaps, was gut related. But I was super depressed and really anxious, and every time I tried to put food in my mouth, I would just, just cry. I couldn't eat back for about 6 months. I got really, really skinny, and which kind of was a blessing in disguise because I fasted my way out of the depression. But I did find a yoga center, and it was Shivananda Yoga Center, and they did yoga and meditation, and I kind of got a bit hooked then when I was about 28, 29, and I was doing that thing of sitting cross-legged. I'd get up really early in the morning, do my asanas, do my 40 minutes of meditation, and then do 40 minutes of meditation in the evening as well, and really devote myself to it, which did actually settle me right down and help me get focused. And it was a good thing at the time. And then I had kids, and it was like there was seemed to be no time for meditation like that. And so, yeah, like you say, I kind of just made it a conscious thing to be when you're chopping the veg, you're chopping the veg. I'm right here chopping the veg. I'm sweeping the floor, I'm right here sweeping the floor. Just being present, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the energy transfer is very real, right? And whatever we put our energy into when you're cooking your own food, if you're whatever kind of mood or emotional state that you're in is being transferred onto your food. And we don't know what kind of emotional state people are in when they're cooking in a restaurant. I can guarantee you that it's probably not a good emotional state because everything seems to be hectic in a restaurant. And then even when you take that to the grocery store, anybody that's whoever stocked those shelves has also touched your food as well, and other people in the store that's picked up the food and put it back down, you're also getting their energy as well. So it's just something interesting to
Yeah.
keep in mind.
No, really important, really important. And also, when we started to work with the food as the medicine, me and the kids, we'd been so sick. So we made a point of making sure that we were in a really peaceful state before we sat down to eat. So we would sit to table and just stop for a minute and, and just breathe. And then we'd hold hands. We'd all make a kind of one up, one down. So you're giving and receiving all at the same time. Make a little magic circle, hold hands around the food, and just say, thank you for the food. Blessings, blessings on the meal. And thank you. And it makes a real difference what kind of state you're in when you're eating. Because if you're in sympathetic mode, which is a bit fun, if you're standing up and eating or driving and eating, it's like your body's like, I might have to run away in a minute. You can't properly digest your food at all. You need to just be really present when you're eating to properly digest your food. So that's actually a really important point you made there. Yeah, good point.
Do you think that that's where prayer kind of originated from? Because I'm not religious at all. I don't believe in any religion. But it's interesting when you look at the whole thought and the idea of praying over your food. That could have been the intention that people were trying to get across, is that the attention onto the food and giving thanks to the food. But then it's just evolved into giving thanks to a non-existent God, in my opinion. But uh, their God, right? But I think that might have been the original intention behind it. It was more giving thanks to the food. And like you were mentioning, everyone holding hands and then giving, thanks to the food. And I think that that's a very important thing because again, go ahead.
I remember what I was going to say. It was about Emoto, Dr. Emoto with his messages in water. And even very recently, in fact, on Valentine's Day, I took an apple and chopped it in half and put one half in a jar marked love and another one in the jar marked hate. And in the house here, we'd walk past the jar and go, I love you. And then there, you're disgusting, to the other one, to the hate one. And I mean, I forgot to do it after about 5 days, and then it sat there for a month. But the one that was loved was fairly intact, and the one that we hated was dark grey, fuzzy, mouldy, gone really rank. So even if your food is doesn't come from necessarily the best source, and you are thinking, oh God, I can't afford pasture raised, I can't afford the best, but I can only get this. And it's like, thank you so much. You've got some food on the table, You just make the best choices you can with the resources you have. And you get an A star plus for even trying because you're making an effort. And then you bless it, you say the words, you go, thank you, this is beautiful, thank you so much. You love it. You love the food, even if it isn't exactly the best. I mean, if you're sitting there and going, "Oh my God, don't think I should eat that. I think it's going to make me sick," it probably will. That's the power of our intent, isn't it? So we can alter outcomes with our intent. And if you don't believe that, then go and do that apple experiment and see for yourself. Your intent has an effect on stuff, and you're made of stuff. So yes, we have to do the same here is talk nicely to ourselves as well and say, well done for trying, well done, good work.
Yeah, influencing yourself like a sort of self hypnosis, right? Like you would say good things to you. That's the reason for like affirmations and things. You're influencing yourself, and
Oh my
it's
God,
not.
no one should underestimate the power of I am. It's massive. You say, I am, fill in the blank. I am succeeding. I am successful. I am finding my way. I am happy. I am healthy. Even if you don't necessarily feel it, it's like a spell, isn't it?
Then it's not out of the realm of possibility that we can influence the food. We can actually even influence others for the better. I mean, I've talked about this several times. The energy that you bring to a conversation, the energy that you bring to a room full of people, right? If you come in and you're down and you're depressed and you're like, oh, hey, how's everything going, guys? Everybody else is going to act like that too, because you influence people with your actions and your attitude and your behavior, right? But if you come in and you're like, hey guys, yes, let's get this, let's do it. We're gonna, do everything great, then it's gonna hype people up.
And likewise, if you even think, oh my God, I wish she hadn't said that, she's such a bitch. If you even think things like that, it like sends a little barb of energy which sticks in the person. It's like it's like we're all walking around cursing. Like Paul Knight, What the Flock TV did a fabulous thing about the cursor, which is what we're using to point on the screens with the curses of the cursor. Like, so I'm saying, I mean, even a thought can end up having a negative impact. So we've got to be really careful what we're thinking, which is why it's so crazy living these days with these weapons of mass distraction right in front of our faces, telling us bad things, showing us disaster movies, making us feel a bit edgy and nervous because of all of the narratives out there, which largely, most of them, I think we should just ignore them, and start working with the power of our intent to actually do the good things that we want to do and do the good things that we want to see.
Yeah, and people can, you go to a concert, right? You feel that hype energy of being at that show, and the same thing works at a church, right? You go to a church, you're in a communal space with other people. That energy is flowing between other human beings, right? And that's been I personally believe, mistaken as like a mysterious force and this force outside of us, when it's
Yeah.
not, it's within all of us. And when we come together and we have that same kind of emotional state and that same kind of energy going on, that energy flows through everyone simultaneously, and it gives you that effect as if there's something external to you doing it, but really it's just everybody that's in the group that's doing it.
I'm really with you on that one. I think we really underestimate the power of, we underestimate our own power. I mean, if we could just all come together and send the right vibes in the right direction, we could sort of like melt everything that's gone wrong, everything that's going wrong here at the moment. You know, I quite often send out prayers of, not prayers, I don't know, affirmations or thoughts where I'm saying, especially if I'm going through portals, like Paul says, if I'm going across a big bridge or if I'm going through a kind of a doorway or an entrance or whatever, I say to myself, I strengthen the web of life and I bring full power to all those who are working to strengthen the web of life and to all those who are creating havoc and you know, messing with the web of life. May all their plans wither, disintegrate, and fail. And so it harm none. And so it is. And if we could all start thinking like that all the time, I think we'd be pretty powerful, actually.
Yeah, I think that the agenda from the media, because there's never really anything good on the news. They don't talk about anything good. There's never anything
Nor
good
will
on
they.
TV. And the things that are good has been like hijacked for some sort of agenda. And I think that that's to subtly program our subconscious mind, because our subconscious mind is a very important aspect of being here in a 3D physical reality. Do you have any thoughts and ideas about the subconscious mind?
Um, well, this our subconscious mind is what got programmed kind of from 0 to 7, isn't it? It's like when we were not in the womb and to about the age of 7, where we're just like a sponge and we're just looking around us and observing and taking it all in. So whatever we see and hear during that time will create our kind of playbook. Like, this is how we operate. Oh, this is how I must react to the big angry man, or this is how I must react to the little child, or, um, and then we end up replaying these things that we just picked up. So being a conscious human grown up adult, we can observe ourselves if we're behaving in a way, anything other than, as we would like to be treated, or do as you would be done by, or in a, is this a moral or correct or nice or friendly way to be, or am I being unreasonable or edgy, or why am I getting triggered? Or, when we're not behaving any other way than courageous, courage and above. If we're being we feel ashamed, or we feel grief stricken, or any of these negative emotions, envious or resentful, or any of these things, angry, we need to like look at ourselves and go, oh, okay, where's that coming from? Which is hard because the emotions kind of literally take you over. It's energy and motion, isn't it? An emotion. You just kind of like start doing stuff before you even know you're doing it when you're stuck in these emotions. But I think if we can, it's these emotions that can teach us where we need to, I really like tapping. Do you know tapping? The emotional freedom technique. I really like tapping. It's a really useful tool. I use it all the time. And if ever I'm feeling anything other than courage and above, because, as long as you can just stay at courage and go, just going to try, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to try, you start to spin up and out into contentment and mutual acceptance and, you know, joy eventually, and you stay away from these negative emotions. So what I like to do is I observe if I feel a negative emotion, which I don't these days. I'm 55 soon, and I've been through some decades of not feeling right. now I've eaten properly and my body's built of really strong stuff, which means I'm able to actually grab hold of my own intent and point it where I will rather than be distracted. So when I get a funny feeling, I go, okay, that doesn't feel right. I grab hold of it and I look at me with whatever triggered me as the mirror to go, why do I feel like that? I never kind of point the finger anymore. I used to, but I never point the finger anymore. If you point your finger, you've got three fingers pointing right back at you. So subconscious is these sort of play, videotapes or play books that come out of you unwittingly because you're not conscious. So, but we can use that subconscious programming to actually grow into much bigger, better, wiser humans.
Do you think jealousy is related to resentment or resentment related to jealousy?
I think they're two different things, aren't they? Um, Jealousy is covetousness, is wanting something that somebody else has got. And resentment is more, um, I mean, you can be resentful of like a flatmate who's just standing in the wrong place. You could be like, for God's sake, what are you doing standing there? I want to be, you're in my space, or that's a kind of resentment, is it? But it's so damaging, resentment. It's really damaging feeling, resentment. If you can't get to the space of forgiveness and acceptance with anything and everything, then there's no healing. Can you hear my dog crying? Sorry.
A little bit, it's okay though. Yeah, I think that it's important to get rid of those resentments because it can be something really tiny and really small that can affect us, way later in our life and come out in a completely different way than what was intended. And
And they eat you up if you don't deal with them. They eat you up. Mm.
and what I've been doing, this is just a helpful tip for anybody that's listening. That's really helped me out, and I would like to get your thoughts and opinions on it too. Is before I go to bed, before I go to sleep every night, I think of the things that might have affected me negatively that day, and then I release them. And if I can't pinpoint any of them, I just say, I release any and all resentments, known or unknown, seen or unseen, from my body, so that they don't, become an issue in the future. And that has really helped me out a lot, because I think that our astral state and when we sleep, we are the most susceptible to our thoughts, our negative thoughts, and our negative ideas throughout that day. And then they manifest in our dreams. So we're getting them double. We're getting them throughout the day. And then when we go to sleep, they're manifesting in our astral state as well. So they're pounding us during the day, and then they're pounding us in our sleep as well. So yeah.
How interesting. That's really interesting. What a good idea to, yeah, say that little affirmation. I release before I go to sleep. Yeah, because these things, if we hold on to them, they can just like make a dent in our aura, can't they? Or they're in our bubble. I don't know what you call it, but like you've got an energy field, haven't you? And like any kind of injury or barb that comes from someone or any kind of hurt can actually make a dent in your which in your toroidal field or whatever it is we want to call it. I don't know. And do you ever hear about that lady, Eileen McCusick, who used to use tuning forks, and she used to be able to like ding a tuning fork and then pull it through your energy field and kind of click and drag to get the dents out. She was using tuning forks and energy frequency vibration to heal those little dents when people hadn't managed to do it for themselves, people who weren't conscious enough to actually, like you, deal with it, you know, deal with it. But it's a constant thing, isn't it? Being human, trying to deal with all the knocks and the blows and the, it's like it's constant onslaught of stuff coming at you that you've got to be like, how do I just stay chill in this space?
Yeah, you got to basically know psychic kung fu. You got to know astral martial arts. Basically, it's wild when you think of even the subtle things, the subtle annoyances of everyday life, someone just cutting you off in traffic, or someone honking the horn at you, or someone, just everyday annoyances. And it seems like that difficult for, it's been difficult for me to pinpoint a lot of those, because we tend to just kind of brush them off, right? But I think that when enough of them kind of build up in us, and they're not really taken care of, and they're not cleared from your aura field, then it tends to build up, and then it can hit you like a big ton of bricks, like
Yeah,
all at once.
yeah, exactly. And this is what is happening with the food as well, because people think, oh, well, I'll just get some fries and I'll just get this little thing snack and I'll just have that little, it'll be okay. It's only one, but we're just getting topped up with rubbish. And then you'll get to 40 or 50 or something, and you'll just come down with something really chronic and nasty. And then you'll be going, to ask for help from, unless you've got some alternative ideas. Um, yeah, so this is what is happening. You got to day by day make the right decisions and deal with things as they come up.
This
Yeah.
is a really interesting aspect here, Emma, because it seems like people don't, they, and I've struggled with this myself. I'm not, acting like I'm, better than anyone. I think that we're all really equal in a lot of different ways, right? But it seems like people, they don't want to change until something goes wrong, right?
It's pain is a really good motivator, but why let it get that far? It does my head in, because people always come to me going, I'm at my wit's end, I'm on my last legs, I just feel so terrible, I can't get up, my energy levels are completely screwed, I've got fibromyalgia or whatever kind of label they want to give it, you know, and it's all to do with those little decisions that you made every day for the last 30 years. And it's like, I just wish I could get through to people so they didn't get to that point where they were in such pain. And then it's difficult. But if you do it now, like you're doing your cooking every day. I'd love to tell you though about oxalates a little bit because naturally occurring plant toxin, because I was a grower and I was growing all my own veg and I was really big on the veg. Really, I was like, let's make veg sexy. Come on, everyone eat more veg. I was on that bandwagon at one point. But some of these plant toxins are vicious, man. And there's certain ones which I've got to say I'm never going to eat again. And I grew them like a champion, and they were in my veg boxes 48 weeks of the year, and that was chard and spinach. And I'm never eating them ever again. Never.
What do you eat now?
I eat pork belly and steak and hamburgers and cheese, fermented dairy, cultured cream, honey. I have lots of non oxalate or low oxalate veg, leeks, onions, garlic, some broccoli, cauliflower, stuff like that, swede, bit of roasted veg, whatever. I eat bananas and pears and apples, but I cook them. I don't eat them raw so much. And I occasionally have like a juice with like raw peeled and seeded cucumber and avocado, lemon. Some juices. I eat lettuce and salads, rocket, with a dressing, with a nice dressing. Um, Stews, soups, lots of good fats, like lots of good fats. Like I make a fat bomb frosting with coconut oil and butter, raw egg yolks and raw honey, and you kind of whip it up, and it's like a frosting. So you can make little cakes with coconut flour, with eggs and butter and cream. Make little cakes and stuff like that. And they're vehicles for fats and ferments. So the more fats you eat, the better, really. that's my uh, plan.
What's your thoughts on fish? Do you eat any
Love,
fish?
yeah, love fish. Yeah, I love it. I eat. My daughter just went and got a job at the fishmongers. She's 16, and she just walked in and went, "Oh, you got a job?" And they were like, "Yeah, come on then, Saturday morning job." For a girl in the fishmongers, there's a bunch of blokes in there with sharp knives and big Wellington boots, spraying everything down with their hose. And yeah, I popped in there to see how she was getting on, and I ordered 6 oysters for my lunch, which she shucked very beautifully. So yeah, I'm really, really into my fish. Yeah, lovely, love fish. Fish head soup for anyone who's got eye problems. Really great fish head soup.
Raw fish or cooked fish?
I like raw fish. I eat raw liver as well, raw beef liver, and raw egg yolks and raw dairy. And well, I ferment my dairy, but yeah, a lot of raw. Yeah, I love raw fish. And everyone's like, oh, but what about parasites and blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you've got a healthy digestive system, um, you can cope. And besides for which, your body is like a universe of you that's there's 37 trillion cells approximately of human cells, and then they're outnumbered at 10 to 1. So, like, how many other organisms are there living in you? There's just trillions and trillions of them. It's like and a lot of them are things like liver flukes and worms, and actually quite big so-called parasites that people get really like, ooh, parasites. But Dr. Natasha says they're there for a reason, and your body calls on them to fulfill a function. So your body will say, hey, we've got topped up with a lot of heavy metals. Oi, Candida, come over here and like sort out these heavy metals for me, because Candida, which is like thrush, which is like a fungal thing, really helps to chelate heavy metals in your system. So if you've got an overgrowth of Candida, chances are you've probably got heavy metal toxicity. So let's look at lots of ways that we could help the Candida rather than try and kill the Candida and take antifungals and start, let's try and help the Candida to get the metals out. And then the Candida will naturally go back to being a small, tiny part of your microbiome rather than having a flush of growth. Yeah, there's lots of reasons why the so-called parasites are there. They're actually doing you a favor. And when you can look at it like that and have a bit of a paradigm shift and think of yourself as a universe of all these different organisms, then it feels nicer than to think that something's trying to get you. That whole word parasite makes you feel as though something's trying to take something for nothing and get you. Right? So let's not call them parasites. Let's call them the cleaners. That's what Dr. Natasha calls them anyway. The cleaners. Well, we've got the cleaners in.
Yeah, the reason that I asked that question, because this is just a theory and a thought. I don't know if there's been any scientific studies and there's any proof or evidence for it, but I had heard that when you cook your food or you bake your food, it releases some kind of supposed cancer causing agent. Do you know anything about this? If this is true or not? Like, this is just something that I heard like 2 or 3
Yeah,
years ago on some kind
yeah,
of
I
post.
know.
It wasn't an article or anything.
Do
Just
you
heard
mean
someone
like
talking about it.
barbecued meat and things like that? Is that what you're talking about?
I
Or
think that
just
it
cooking food
I
generally?
think that it was related to the oven, like something with the vegetables that when you bake them or something, it releases some kind of uh, uh, cancer causing agent, and it doesn't have that if you're eating your vegetables raw. Again, I don't know how much truth there is to it or not.
I, I don't know. I mean, I read some of these things. I'm just like, nah. My gut just tells me. My gut tells me, like, nah, shut up. Don't believe it. I don't care what they say about their, medical papers or these, some of them might hold some truth, but I think some of them are, you know, um, they're written for the person who's paid for it to be written. So, who's commissioned this work? You know, there's this guy. Do you know him, Tim Noakes? He was a doctor, is a doctor in South Africa, and he was working for a big university, and he wrote a book called carb loading or something. I can't remember, but it was about marathon runners, and it was about how you could like sustain your energy running a marathon by carb loading. And he'd worked for 30 years or something on these projects, funded, I think, by the grain cartels in this big university. And he got to about 60 and he was running up a hill because he was a runner, and he lost his mojo. He's like, oh my God, I haven't got any energy. What's the matter with me? And then he went home and he looked in his inbox, and there was some new republication of the Atkins diet, which is a high fat diet, low carb, high fat, anti to everything that he'd been teaching. And he thought to cheer himself up, he'd debunk it. So he had a little read of it and he went, actually, this makes a lot of sense. And then he had to go back on his 30 years of talking about carb loading and say, you know what, I think I got it all wrong. And he was quite close to the end of his career. So he said to himself, I'm just going to come clean. And then it was called The Law of Running, his first book, The Law of Running. And then he wrote another book called The Law of Nutrition, completely turning on its head what he'd said before. And it's like, it's not about carbs, it's about fats and proteins. And we need them more than we realize. And, you know, anyway, they took him to the cleaners, man. They really nearly destroyed him for speaking out like that.
Well, I'm
Anyway,
glad
I
that
forget what you're.
he had the enough gall about him and had the balls to actually do that, because a lot of people, they don't want to correct themselves whenever they get something wrong, and they don't want to come out and say the opposite, right? But I think that that's the
No,
really
man.
honorable thing to do.
I've had to make a U-turn on, I was telling people to make green smoothies with spinach and chard, you know, and knowing what I know now about oxalates, it's like, oh my God, I'm really sorry I said that. And I gave it to my kids, for heaven's sake, for years, making the problems worse. Oxalates are a killer, man. And, they've known about oxalate overload in the medical literature since the 1890s. And then around 1920 or something, it kind of, or maybe 1940, I don't know, but it disappeared. The kind of mention of oxalate overload. I don't know if they thought, oh, well, it's not a problem anymore, but it bloody well is a problem. Also, about the same time, who showed up on the scene? 1930s, telling everyone to eat their spinach. I'm taught by the sailor man. Na, 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 na. With his olive oil girlfriend called Olive Oil. Oh yeah, that was the beginning of them promoting the Mediterranean diet. You know, that's why I think things are happening on purpose. That kind of silly reason. It's not a silly reason. It's just my gut feeling is telling me they've been purposefully weakening us. And oxalate overload. They made the potato a staple in Ireland. You talk to anyone who's brought up in Ireland, it's like, oh yeah, potatoes, potatoes. That was our staple. Potatoes are jam packed full of oxalates. And then, they created the famine. I don't know when the famine was in Ireland. I think it was the 1800s at some point. So they had studied what it was to flood a population with oxalates. And then, they knew about it basically. What do you find in every shop, on every street corner, every convenience store, you call them, I think, of every town, in every country virtually? What can you find at the checkout? You used to be able to anyway. Crisps and chocolate, or chips, you call them. Crisps and chocolate. They're both jam packed full of oxalates. And we're all just merrily topping up on them all day long.
Yeah, and they're conveniently placed right there, very easily accessible at the checkout. Yeah, it's definitely a planned thing to a very large degree. So, what are some of the things that you use to like cook with, like as in like pots and pans and the things like that? Because we know that certain pots and pans and cookware have dangerous, harmful chemicals on them too. So, what is there a certain brand or is
Oh
there a
my
certain
God, yeah.
kind of cookware that you cook with?
Um, a cast iron, great. Cast iron skillets, brilliant. In enameled pans, like Le Creuset, they call them in France. I don't know. They're kind of like pans that have an enamel coating on them and a lid, a big heavy lid, or a Dutch oven. Yeah, but non. They used to have aluminium pans as well. Just awful. I mean, stainless steel is all right. Stainless steel's okay.
You just froze up there for a second when you said something about non-stick pans. I didn't get anything after non-stick pans.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying, yeah, non-stick pans are dreadful. They're terrible, terrible chemicals. You don't want those in your house, non-stick pans. But an iron skillet, great. And aluminium as well. They have some pans that are aluminium, very lightweight. That you want to watch out. You don't want an aluminium pan, but stainless steel is okay. Yeah, good point.
Thanks so much, Emma, for coming on my show. I really appreciate you. I really enjoyed the conversation. Let people know where they can find you online, plug your YouTube channel and your website.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm at timelesscookery.com, and I have an online cookery school for the GAPS protocol, and I have a GAPS app that I've got that I'm teaching people all over the world. And you can find me on Instagram at Timeless Cookery and YouTube, Timeless Cookery. And on Facebook, I'm just me, Emma Goodwin, because I did have a Timeless Cookery thing. And then in the metaverse, they swapped everything around. And now I'm just me, Emma Goodwin, on YouTube, on Fastbook, I call it.
Mark Zuckerberg strikes again. Thanks so much, Emma. I really appreciate your time this evening. And shout out for Paul Knight on What the Flock TV for hooking us up together. And for everyone else, thanks for watching and listening. And the links to all of Emma's information will be in the description of this video. Much love to everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the YouTube algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. All of my links are also in the description. Please subscribe on all alternative platforms, audio only version of the show on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts on Rumble, Odysee, and what's the other one? Rumble, Rokfin. And remember, we're not only in a spiritual war, but a war on humanity. Stay aware, stay alert, keep loving your heart for everyone, stay safe out there. And if you can see through the illusion, you are the solution. See you guys next time.